Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the UK Stroke Assembly online and in your homes. It's been a bumper week this week, and it's just, I can't catch up, to be honest. We've had Chris Tarrant on Monday, who ran our virtual quiz. Thank you to all of you that joined us on Monday for the quiz and raised money with us. We have over £1,000 that's come in from the quiz, so fantastic effort from everyone involved. Really hope you enjoyed it. We've had 3 sessions this week as well. You can catch up on everything so far at stroke.org.uk/UKSA virtual. And some fantastic news to share with you today too. Last night, the events team attended the virtual International Corporate Event Awards, and the Stroke Assembly was up for Best Motivational Event of the Year. We got Silver Award, and we were so pleased to pick up this prize last night, up against some major brands like KFC, Channel 4, Barclays Bank. We're really, really proud of picking up this prize, and it's a big thanks to you, the viewers of the ongoing virtual webinar series, and those that continue to support the UK Stroke Assembly, that we won the award last night. So thanks for continuing to support us and being part of this virtual series. So this week is all about your support that is available to you from the Stroke Association. And we've had the helpline session on Monday. We heard about My Stroke Guide on Wednesday. And today we talk about our service Here For You, volunteer telephone support for people affected by stroke, set up by the Stroke Association during the coronavirus crisis. As always, we want to hear from you. So have your say in the chat box, introduce yourselves and say hello to others, and put your questions to today's speakers. We have Natalie with us today, as usual, taking your questions and comments. Good morning, Nat.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's session. As always, if you do have any comments and questions, please do use the comment box. You'll be able to find this on the right-hand side of your page, and if you scroll right down to the bottom, you'll be able to use the text bar to input your questions and comments and submit those using the arrow key. I look forward to reading those throughout.
Thanks, Natalie. So please do post your comments in the chat box. We really do want to hear from you. And also a big plea for a favour from you all, if we can today. We want your feedback on these webinars. We want to continue to making them the best they can possibly be for you. Natalie's going to post a link in the chat box now. After today's webinar, please spend 5 minutes just telling us what you think. We want to bring these webinar series back after the summer for another round. And we want to do webinars that you want to hear about. So please tell us what you'd like to hear more of, and tell us what you think. We'd really appreciate that. Thank you. So on to today, Here For You, our service for people affected by stroke. Delighted to have Lisa and Paul from the Stroke Association with us. I'm going to hand over to them now for their presentation, and I'll see you in a moment.
Thanks, Tony. Welcome to everybody for today's presentation. We're going to be talking about the new Here For You telephone support service that we've recently set up. My name is Lisa McDermott. I'm part of the UK Volunteering and Community Partnerships team. And I will be presenting today. I'll be going through all the material in terms of the service. And then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. And my colleague, Paul Stevenson, will be joining us at that point. So what we're hoping to do today is to give you a little bit of an overview of the Here For You service. And we want to tell you how people can support it, but also how they're being supported by the service. We're going to touch on a few of the challenges that maybe we've experienced since we set it up, but we're also going to let you have some feedback that we're already receiving about the impact that the service is having. So we thought it would be helpful to give you a little bit of background about how we found ourselves here. So as you're probably aware, the pandemic has probably affected pretty much every aspect of our everyday lives. It's also had a huge impact on the work of our charity. So at the beginning of March, Here For You didn't even exist. And we thought it would be helpful for you to understand how we got to where we are now. So in about mid-March, we had to make the hard decision to stop all our voluntary groups and service groups meeting face-to-face. We also stopped all our face-to-face training, our home visits, and very soon after, we had to shut all our offices. and all our staff, where they could, were working from home. But the stark reality for us was that people were still having strokes. Families were still having to deal with the devastation of seeing a loved one have a stroke. And as part of that, many people were suddenly having to become carers for someone who'd had a stroke. Now, the lockdown, when it happened, as a result of coronavirus, also meant that many stroke survivors, their carers, they weren't able to see friends or families as much as they would usually. They also weren't able to attend some of the clubs, groups that we run, but also pursue some of those usual interests and hobbies that they may have had. And as a result, people started to feel understandably quite lonely, quite isolated, and we knew we wanted to try and continue to support people. So as we started this new normal, we started to think about how can we continue to provide support to people. So that's how Here For You came into being. So once we started work on the service, within about 2 to 3 weeks, working at pace, the UK Volunteering and Community Partnerships team had set up an operational telephone support service that we now know as Here For You. Here For You is very much around connecting people affected by stroke. So when we talk about people affected by stroke, we obviously mean stroke survivors, but also their carers. And we wanted to connect them with a trained volunteer over the telephone. It's got 2 key aims, and it really depends on the needs of the person who's being supported through that service. The first is to combat isolation that many stroke survivors and carers were understandably feeling. And when we think about isolation, we often think about people who are on their own. But actually, we were thinking about perhaps the people who'd suddenly lost access to all those support networks that they may have had previously. The second was to offer peer support to stroke survivors and carers. So that being to enable them to speak to another stroke survivor, another carer, who could perhaps relate to some of the things that they were going through. And we currently have an agreement to run the service until at least December 2020, which we're really pleased about. I suppose it's also worth noting that all our previous befriending and mentoring offers were very much linked to our commissioned services. So they were only available in areas where we had a service. Here For You is open to anybody, regardless of their location, because it's a standalone, non-commissioned service. And we thought it'd be nice to give you a little bit of an insight to actually, in practical terms, what the service does for people. So we have a short film here featuring Hayden, one of our volunteers, and Krishna, a stroke survivor, talking about the new service. And I think Tony or Natalie's going to play that film for you now.
Since it's lockdown, I thought, why not try and make a cake, because that's one of the challenges that I still find hard. I made a mistake, so I had to start all over again. My name is Krishna. I had a stroke in 2005 when I was only 18 years old. Things were tough at that time. I wasn't able to read, write, speak, and I had lost all my memory. I found it hard to do simple things like brushing my teeth, showering.
I've recently spoken to somebody, and you know, it really brought it back to me. Those of us who have had a stroke know all too well how lost you can be, and that's what we're trying to do at the moment. The Stroke Association have created this new service, Here For You, being able to speak on the phone to somebody who's gone through that experience in their life.
When the coronavirus lockdown happened, processing all that information was a bit of a challenge.
There's no two ways about it. Stroke can be a very lonely experience. As a volunteer for the Stroke Association's new Here For You telephone support service, I keep in regular contact with my matched stroke survivor by phone.
Normally I would go to the shops. At the moment I'm not really leaving the house. The Stroke Association have helped me by checking on how I am.
We are here to give that little bit of extra help and support, to help people along, to rebuild their daily life and go forward.
It's an immediate connection, even though our journeys are different. A familiar person on the other side of the phone can make a big problem go away.
We are survivors, which means we are here to tell the tale, to assure others that there is life after stroke.
This service is vital. In times like these, they're really trying to support stroke survivors as fast as they can.
Thank you. I think that's a great film. I think it really demonstrates the power of supporting people through things like this. But we wanted to also talk about the people who are supporting it and how people can get referred into the service. So who's volunteering? Well, the volunteers that are coming forward to support the service come from three main areas. Many of our existing volunteers haven't been able to carry out their usual roles, or at least not in the same way as they usually would. So many have kindly put themselves forward to support the service. Our corporate partners, included among that are British Gas and David Lloyd, to name but two, have been putting their staff forward to support us. And we've also had a great response from people outside of the charity who've perhaps never been involved before, and they've been applying through our website. But we've also got staff as well who are coming in to volunteer for the first time with us as well. And I suppose it's interesting to note that Juliet, our chief exec, is also volunteering as part of the service. And when people apply to support the service, there are two key roles that they can take on. The first is the connect and chat role. And this is very much about telephoning one of our beneficiaries, whether that's a stroke survivor or a carer, and having an informal, friendly chat with them about their interests, about their hobbies, and perhaps how they're dealing with the pandemic and lockdown. These calls take place once a week. They'll last about 30 minutes, and they're delivered in blocks of 12 weeks. The role is primarily there to reduce the isolation that some people might be feeling currently. And with these calls, the volunteer may identify that someone might need an additional level of support. And so we always provide our volunteers with information about where they can signpost people to. So things like My Stroke Guide, the helpline. The second role is what we're calling the lived experience telephone support role. Now, the mechanics of the calls are the same. One call per week for 30 minutes in a block of about 12 weeks. The emphasis is slightly different on these calls because in this role, volunteers will be offering peer support. And that's when someone supports someone else with a similar lived experience or health condition. So not only will people undertaking this role be volunteers, they will also be stroke survivors or carers themselves. And when people are putting themselves forward for these particular roles, we're asking that they are approximately about 2 years post their own stroke experience. This is because they are potentially going to be supporting other stroke survivors and carers who may well potentially only be 3 to 6 months post their own stroke experience. And having that 2 years of lived experience is going to be incredibly valuable when they're supporting other people, because they'll be able to talk about some of the physical, emotional and practical challenges that they might be facing. So those are our sort of two key roles in terms of volunteers, but we also wanted to let you know how people could refer into the service. So our beneficiaries, our stroke survivors and carers, who want to be supported through the service can come in through a variety of different routes. Many are coming through our existing stroke recovery services and other life after stroke services, where some of our beneficiaries just need a little bit of extra support at this moment. Many are coming through our local volunteering and community teams across the UK. Many new people are being referred in through our stroke helpline, and also through our brand new role called the Stroke Connector role. And that's a role that's working in areas where we don't currently have service coverage. And we very, very recently just enabled third parties to refer in, and or whether people can refer in themselves via our website. So there's quite a lot of different avenues whereby people can refer into the actual service. When someone is referred into the service by themselves or by someone else, we try to gather as much information as we can about that person, and we'll ask them to fill in a referral form. This will include details about their stroke or their caring role by asking a series of questions of what we call lived experience questions. You know, when did they have their stroke or become a carer? How do they currently feel? What's important to them? And are there any particular challenges that they are facing? But we also ask people about their hobbies and interests. And are they looking for peer support, or are they just feeling a little bit isolated and want to chat to someone too? And we do this for two reasons. The first is the more information we have about people helps us make better matches. And we're going to talk about that a little bit shortly. The second is that we also need to make sure that the Here For You service is the most appropriate way to support people, because sometimes people's support needs are beyond what we can offer within this service. The matching process is the process that we go through to decide which volunteer should support which beneficiary. And it really helps us to personalise the match. And that means hopefully we can produce a good match that meets the expectations of both parties. We use the information provided by the volunteer on their application form and the information provided by the beneficiary on their referral form to make those matches. It's not a case of putting a pin in two names. It can be quite an in-depth process. And as a result, it can sometimes take a few weeks to find a good match for someone. Some matches are easier to make than others. Some beneficiaries are just looking to talk to someone on a regular basis, and so we might be able to match them on things that they're interested in, like hobbies and interests. Other beneficiaries might want to specifically talk to another stroke survivor or carer, and often someone who might have had a particular stroke experience, whether that's memory loss, fatigue, or anything else that can happen after a stroke. And sometimes that can be a little bit of a tricky process to find a suitable match. Once we do find a suitable match, then we make arrangements for that first call to take place between the volunteer and the beneficiary. When we were setting up the service, we also wanted to make sure that we were checking in with people to make sure everything was going okay. So throughout the match, we check in with both the volunteer and the beneficiary. And these check-ins are similar for both. We check in after the first call, at week 6 and at week 12, which is ordinarily the last call. This helps us to make sure the calls are going well, but it also provides us with some valuable feedback that we can use to improve the service. It's always interesting to have some numbers around these things, I think, because I think it can put it into some context about what we've been dealing with over the past few months. So the service itself has been running now for 3 months. And since then, we've had over 550 beneficiaries apply for support through this service. 400 people have volunteered to support the service. And in all, we've trained about 491 people, and that includes staff and volunteers, because we've encouraged our staff who are supporting the volunteers to access the training. And for some people, they will have had to do 2 bits of training. But I think one of the best things is we already have 350 active matches. So that means 350 beneficiaries have been matched and are being supported by Here For You volunteers. There have certainly been challenges. Here For You was set up at pace. As I said earlier, within 2 to 3 weeks we were operational. So it's constantly evolving. Over the past 3 months, as I said, we've had a few challenges and we've had to make quick decisions about how to deal with them to make sure the service continued to run smoothly. As we said earlier, matching is quite an in-depth process. And originally it was one person in our team making those matches. As more and more beneficiaries referred into the service, we've had to draft more people into that team to make those matches and help run the service. We've had to engage and redeploy staff to act as volunteer managers to support volunteers. And with more volunteers applying to support the service, we've also had to look at the challenges of how we support volunteers. So what we're doing at the moment is we are planning to recruit other volunteers to increase the capacity we have to support the volunteers who are making the telephone calls. We're currently putting together some training for those people, and we're really looking forward to engaging people as volunteer managers within the service. All the training's been delivered via Skype for Business, and I've been sort of primarily leading on that training, and that in itself has thrown up quite a lot of challenges. For some people, online training is something they had never actually done before. And in response, we offered one-to-one support sessions for anybody who needed it, so that we could talk them through how they could get on to the actual Skype for Business session. And to date, everybody who's needed to has been able to access the training. Now, we were also originally had a 12-week maximum limit on all matches. But last week, we introduced some new guidelines, which takes into account certain situations where perhaps volunteers and beneficiaries would like to continue to talk to each other outside of the service provision. And what we are doing at the moment is trying to explore the possibility of perhaps a new central telephone system that could help us to facilitate and support and run the service. So that's given you, hopefully, a little bit of an overview of where we're at with the service and what's been happening. But I think the best thing we can do is show you some of the feedback that we've been getting from people, even at this early stage, about how they feel the service is going. So we've got a few quotes for you here. The first quote said, "H is lovely. The call was absolutely brilliant. We had a good chat and chin wag. Nice to speak to someone else where I can have a bit of a moan and get to know each other. We have a lot in common. Thank you for the good matching." Our second quote says, "The call was exceptional. Had a good connection with Dee, like I'd known him for years. Dee's knowledge and understanding was brilliant. He has a natural ability and we were matched well. The Stroke Association, the volunteers and the support from Dee has been priceless." And finally, this one. "Thoroughly enjoyed the phone calls. F has a very pleasant outlook and attitude. I would give the service 11 out of 10. And for us, those quotes are just fantastic. We've been really pleased to see some of the feedback that we've had from people who've been accessing the service. So hopefully in today's session, we've given you that overview of the Here For You service. We've talked about how people are supported and can support the service. We've talked about some of those challenges that we've had, but we've also hopefully shared with you some feedback that we've had around that service. So we're obviously happy to take any questions that anybody might have, but thank you very much for listening today.
Lisa, thanks so much for that great presentation. I know we've had some questions and comments come through. I think Paul may be joining us as well for this. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, thanks very much. Very nice presentation from Lisa.
Thanks for joining us too. So Natalie, over to you. What questions and comments have we had so far?
Well, it's been busy in the chat box today, so thank you for everyone for sharing your comments with us. I'll just read a few comments if that's okay first, as we've got a few lived experience volunteers with us. So Ruth says, "Hi, I am a lived experience volunteer. It is so rewarding when my beneficiary says, 'Thank you so much for your time.'" And we've also got Janet, who says, "I am a lived volunteer and I am doing this instead of my usual face-to-face volunteering. It is very rewarding, especially in these strange times." So thank you both for sharing those comments. I think they both showcase to us how really important this service is. I do have a question for you, for Lisa and Paul, and it's from Gary, which says, "How do I contact Here For You?"
If you're interested in being involved in the service in terms of getting support, you can either go to our helpline and call them and they can refer you in, or you can go to our website and there's a self-referral form where you can sign up to be part of the Here For You service and get calls from a volunteer.
Thank you, Paul. I'll pop those links into the chat box as well for you all to view. I haven't got any questions currently, so if you do have questions or comments you'd like to share with us, please do pop them in the chat box and I'll be able to feed those back to Paul and Lisa for you.
Yes, it's very nice to hear back from volunteers, the experienced volunteers, and it's great to hear that people are having a positive experience. And we do have quite a few of our current volunteers, as was said, in other roles who have transitioned to help out the Here For You service, and that's worked really well and helped people to feel like they're giving something and they're still involved actively as a volunteer, and that's been great for us.
And Lisa, you mentioned we're still recruiting volunteers, and Paul, you've just shared how people can get in touch with you. How many more volunteers do we really want? Is it as many as possible right now that we're looking for?
Oh yeah, how long's a piece of string, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think we're still getting quite a steady flow of beneficiaries being referred into the service. So yeah, I mean, we're still actively recruiting volunteers for that service. Yeah, I don't necessarily think we've got any targets around it, but yeah, we are continually recruiting because we are continually getting referrals from beneficiaries. So yeah.
Thank you. I might ask one more question if you don't mind. How have you funded, or how have we, the Stroke Association, funded this service?
The funding's primarily come from donated income and grants, like most of our sort of universal services, like My Stroke Guide and things. So,
thank you. Thank you. Anything else, Natalie, before we finish?
Just another comment that's coming from Janet that says, "Welcome the opportunity to extend it. One of my beneficiaries is aiming to return to work in September, and I'd like to be able to speak to her until then, which is beyond the 12 weeks. So there seems to be a real interest to sort of continue this support for people outside the 12-week service.
Yeah. I think I mentioned in the challenges, we have been looking at this, and we have got some guidance in place now for people who wish to continue talking to the people that they've been supporting, and that will generally be done as a personal arrangement between people. But yeah, we have guidance in place around that. So if there's any questions on that, then just talk to your member of staff who support them to help them.
It's great to hear that people want to continue, you know, and build a lasting friendship out of this service, and we can certainly organise that to happen. And it's really nice to know that that's going on.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's clearly a vital service, and from the comments we've had just from today, people are getting so much out of it. Lisa, Paul, we've run out of time, I'm afraid, but thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you joining us at the Stroke Assembly.
Thanks very much. And thanks everyone for listening.
Well, everyone, that wraps up this week's Stroke Assembly series for you. We're back next week with plenty more. 3 sessions for you next week. On Monday at 11 o'clock, join us for a session on intimacy and relationships. Then on Wednesday, we're talking about how to get online when you have aphasia. And then finally, on Friday, we're back again at 11 o'clock, talking about the ways you can keep connected during the coronavirus crisis. So 3 sessions for you next week. Looking forward to those. Thanks to Paul and to Lisa today. If if you want to find out more about Here For You, we'll continue to post the links before the end of the broadcast. But thanks for joining us this week, and hopefully see you all next week. Take care.